Well, hey there, scholarly gamers, and welcome to the latest episode of PC Building Fundamentals. Right, so this time we're going to be talking about motherboards, the importance of, well, choosing the right motherboard for you, how vital they are to, your actual system. It's another one of these items that so many people, they end up skimping on, thinking that, well, what does it matter? I got a motherboard that works with the processor I want to use, and I saved some money. What's the big deal? It is a big deal. Well, first, let's step into our virtual PC shop here, shall we? Our little workshop. Better turn the lights on, I suppose. And when it comes to motherboards, there's obviously, a lot of choices out there. Ultimately, which motherboard you choose is going to dictate what platform you're going to be on. Whether that's, first of all, Intel or AMD. As we've discussed before, slightly, there's no right or wrong answer here. I mean, yes, for gaming, the Intel platform at the moment is the strongest candidate, But when we say that, I mean, we're talking percentage points, right? I mean, we're talking really, really small margins. Whereas, to be fair, when it comes to content creation, whether you're streaming, whether you're making videos, the AMD Ryzen platform is quite desirable because you can get quite a lot of cores for significantly less money than the Intel platform. But your single-threaded performance, right, which most games, aren't using more than 2 cores. There are some exceptions as newer games come out. Yes, multi-core optimization is getting better, but for the most part, games prefer frequency, and that's where Intel shines. I mean, the newest i7s can easily hit 5 gig and beyond, depending on what kind of cooling solution you have. But the Ryzen processors, they're no slouch when it comes to gaming. Again, we're just talking about very, very slight margins. So you need to decide which platform you want to go with. And even then, within the AMD and the Intel platform, you've got your conventional, consumer-grade processors, and then you've got the workstations. If we think about with the AMD platform, for example, most of us are just going to go with the Ryzen platform, but there is of course the Threadripper platform, which Threadripper is they are quite amazing. These huge amount of cores on these processors, and of course quad channel memory. There's all sorts of great things about them, but they are expensive. So when I was doing my shopping, I was on the fence here. I mean, my last system was an Intel, an i7. Prior to that, I had an AMD. Prior to that, I had an Intel. Right? I don't have any real brand loyalty here. So when it came time to decide, I thought I was going to give Ryzen a go because I'd heard so many good things, read good reviews. I've got a classmate who has a Ryzen, whereas the other one has an i7. And performance-wise, they were so close. But the thing for me is because I wanted to be able, for video editing and other things like that, the Ryzen just seemed like the way to go. So once I decided that was the platform I wanted, the next thing was looking at motherboards, because there's a lot of different models, right? And there's a lot of different price brackets. And the thing to understand is that, it's easy to look at these motherboards and say, oh, you're just paying all that extra money for RGB, or all sorts of other superfluous features that I don't need. And, it's a very common misconception. Yes, don't get me wrong, there are some motherboards out there that do have, features that, oh my god, who's ever going to use these things? But there's also quite a lot of features that make these these high priced motherboards quite essential if you want your maximum amount of performance. Ultimately I went with the and we'll just show it virtually here. Of course I've got to install the thing, But I went with the X470 platform or chipset. And I went with the Asus board, the ROG Republic of Gamers Crosshair 7 Hero. Quite a mouthful, I know. But if we just have a look at this virtually first before we have a look at it physically, because I should be able to zoom in quite a bit here. Yes, indeed, I can. You know, it's a good looking board. First of all, it's got quite a nice, you know, design with the, you know, this kind of black, kind of muted look, but at the same time it does have RGB, as does just about everything these days. You know, but there's a lot of really good features here. One of the biggest ones is the really strong VRMs, the voltage, you know, regulation chips right here, right, and the MOSFET. You know, there's all sorts of great features that really make it a strong motherboard when it comes for overclocking and when it comes to power delivery. Remember, we talked about how important it is to get a good strong PSU power supply. Well, there's no point in spending that money on a good power supply to then team it up with a cheap motherboard. The thing about motherboards is if you skimp there, you know, you will have decreased performance. You might not notice it at stock speed so much, but it's just little things, you know, the efficiency between the chipset that's on the motherboard, the PCI Express lanes, the memory, you know, the memory controllers. Same with the, you know, when it comes to your hard drives, your M2 capabilities. All these kind of things will add up and make the PC quite a bit slower than what it could potentially be. If you've ever watched any other videos about system integrators like the infamous Walmart PC, you know, they had some top spec components in there, a good video card, a good processor, but then it was ultimately let down by a really, really bad budget motherboard. You know, when you have that cheap of a platform, it doesn't matter what components you put on it, the performance is going to be, you know, not that great. You know, so if we have a little look at what one of these expensive motherboards gets you, I mean, obviously, right, you get, you know, a good looking box, and, you know, it'll tell you all the features on it. Obviously, it's a, you know, the X470, it's designed for Ryzen. This board, yes, is SLI compatible as well as like Crossfire compatible, but as time goes on, we're really moving away from those technologies. They're just not as good as the, you know, they were all hyped up to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, yes, you can get some top tier performance in as long as it's working. The big problem is half the time, you know, game support is quite bad, and then, you know, dealing with drivers and all that kind of thing, it can be quite irritating. But right, so the Crosshair, you know, 7 Hero, in a nutshell, you can see it is the X470 chipset, which is quite important because when it comes to chipsets, you know, the more up to date, the better. But with AMD, this will support the future processors. So with Intel, you can't always say that. Usually all it means is once the new processors come out, yes, they will make new motherboards, but the current ones, all you have to do is do a BIOS update and they'll be compatible. But yes, you know, I mean, you pay this amount of money, you know, you can probably find it on sale every so often in Amazon. There is the Crosshair 6, which is the X370, which is still a great board. You might be able to find a deal on that. But I would recommend going with the 470 if you are, you know, planning for the future, because one of the things about the next generation of processors is they're going to support PCI Express 4.0. And as we've learned, this motherboard and many others in the same kind of price bracket, the circuitry already exists. Like, even so, they're only a 3.0 slot. With the BIOS update, they should be compatible because the actual physical circuitry hasn't changed. So that was a really, really cool bit of news. I'm pretty excited for that because that's my plan. Later down the line, I want to get one of these new Ryzen processors with even more cores. But the unboxing experience for the Asus products is always quite nice. I mean, look, you get this wonderful, built-in kind of lid thing. It just kind of pops open. The presentation is fantastic on these boards, and as you can see, it's obviously been packed away quite carefully. For transit, it's very safe. But the first time I opened it, I was quite pleased with what I saw. It was basically like Christmas time, which was actually before Christmas when I got it. But when you're handling your motherboard, obviously be careful. You can damage the underside. That's why it's always a good idea to just put it on top of the box like this if you're going to be working on it. Oh wow, that's a bit of camera shake. Sorry. Yeah, I remember I had to move shift the camera over a little bit. But at a glance, you can see on this motherboard you've got 4 RAM slots. RAM we'll have to discuss later. On Ryzen it can be a bit tricky because you can get up to a certain speed if you're using 2 sticks, but if you go up to 4 sticks, the highest speed you'll be able to achieve does drop quite a bit. But as you can see, you've got basically your 3 PCI Express slots. So it's possible to do SLI, but again, for better performance, you're always better going off with a single card. But you've got the full-size slots there. You've also got the smaller slots if you have any expansion cards. There's the M2 cover, which is really quite nice because it acts as a heat sink for your M2 hard drive. Sure enough, when that comes off, it had a bit of thermal padding at the bottom. And then over there is another area where you can put another M2. The rear I/O, which I think I'll show in a minute. Oh right, yes, the VRMs. Again, when I was recording this, the audio just wasn't very good, hence why I'm kind of doing a voiceover instead. But the VRMs, as I say, they're some of the best in class. And VRMs are really important when it comes to overclocking as well as system stability. And the cooling solution here is decent. It's passive, it's not an active. Depending what kind of heatsink you've got on, we'll be able to at least blow a bit of air on them. Or if, like me, you want to go eventually the water cooling route, I'll actually be using a block to water cool those fully. But some nice little features for a board. As you can see from the back, it's got a built-in I/O shield. No longer, do you have to mess around with those silly silver things that end up cutting your hands. It's got one built in. Trying to think what else what was I talking about here? Oh right, I was just kind of getting a close-up of the yeah, there we go. As you can see in the I/O, I mean that's a ton of USB 3.1 ports. You also see here, right, they've got a little a BIOS USB port. This is fantastic. You can actually update the BIOS of the motherboard without needing to fully enter Windows or anything like that. It still has legacy ports for keyboard and mouse, just to be safe. But come on, in this day and age, we're all using USB devices, right? Some really good BIOS updates here. If you need to roll back the BIOS, you can push that switch. Likewise, just a simple button to clear the CMOS, which is extremely handy. It's got was it gigabit LAN or 10 gigabit LAN? I can't remember. It's just, this is the thing, when you're paying the extra for a board like this, you do get a lot of great features. I mean, it's got Type-C on the back. Obviously the Asus audio is really quite good if you need surround sound or optical out and all that, but I think a lot of us nowadays are just using headsets, aren't we? But no, I mean the design of the board is it's quite nice. It definitely looks the part. I want to actually kind of fast forward to this because I remember when I was recording this, as I quite often do, I was just kind of ranting along, talking about it. I think I'm gonna put it away here soon, right, or put it off to the side. Let me fast forward. Oh yes. Oh, what the? Yeah, that's right. Let me just rewind this real quick, because the next step that I did was going through what else you get with these kind of some of the superfluous items. There's a reason though, because there's a code here that I want someone to be able to hopefully take use of. Asus Republic of Gamers, they give you a whole bunch of stickers, right? If you're into that thing. And I'll be honest, I have used a few, not like on my computer, but on other little items. These cable labels, though, those I'm definitely going to use at some point. But, you can see this is probably targeting a certain demographic. Things like the do not disturb and whatnot, you probably won't need to use those. But some of the emblems, are pretty cool. Like I think I've used a couple on a case for my tablet. I've got a desktop fan where you see the little circular ones right there. One of those fits perfectly on my desktop fan, so it looks like it's an Asus fan. But pretty cool. You also get a handy little what I'm using actually at the moment is a mat for your coffee, your mugs, your glasses. You of course get all the drivers and whatnot and applications on a CD or DVD, which is great if you have an optical drive. I do not, so I just went to the website, to download all of those items. Because that's the other thing too with Asus, you get a really good software suite, which will later down the line we'll probably have a little look at. Some great features, the ability to overclock. Right, yeah, this was what. It came with a coupon for cable mod, so you'll have to pause, but there you go. If you visit custom.cablemod.com, enter that coupon code at checkout, and you will save, I can't see because of lighting, 20% off. Obviously it's a one-time use only, first come first served. I have not used it. Even so, I did get Cable Mod cables, but I didn't order them directly from Cable Mod, so that's why it wasn't any use to me. But right, you get your usual stuff. That's the SLI bridge that comes, bundled with motherboards. They're not very amazing looking. Most people, if you do go SLI, buy an aftermarket bridge, and then of course all of the cables and whatnot that are in there. Your typical stuff. You've got some RGB cables, some SATA cables and whatnot, but overall, it's a great package, and you'd hope so for that kind of money. But it's not about it being expensive. It's about it being a quality item. And the thing is, you notice the build quality when it comes time to actually put it together. And once you get it in and it's mounted, it does look fantastic. Excuse me, which should be starting any minute now. Yes, here. There we go. So it was actually quite funny when I was putting this together, and I think this is what happens. If maybe you're trying to record something, you're trying to talk, you're trying to stay on a certain train of thought, and doing everything all at once. I had made a point. I pointed out, some screws to use. Like, so, make sure to use these ones. And it wasn't until after, I did it all and, put it all together, I was like, man, why the hell did I say to use these ones? These aren't the ones you want to use. You want to use a completely different set. But oh well, these things happen. But yeah, so right, if you're gonna, to install your motherboard, I know there's arguments out there about whether or not you need to be grounded or not. The way that we were taught at school, for actual tech support, and the way that Microsoft, everywhere, all these places do their accreditation, is, we always ground ourselves with either a static wristband or a leg band. So you do want to make sure that you don't have, even if it's just a case of making sure you touch something to ground yourself before touching your components, because electrostatic discharge can kill things fairly quickly. But you want to prep your area, right? You want to prep your case for installation. If you've got all of your components already, I highly recommend, building quite a bit of it outside of the case. That can be quite handy. Putting your CPU on, your memory, and then installing it. Only thing is, if you've got a cramped case, that might, it might be a bit tricky. Because we've got this wonderful, nice open plan case, that's not what we're doing. We're just gonna go ahead and install the motherboard on its own in here. So the first thing I'm doing is, of course, putting the standoffs on the case. These are really important. Those little standoffs basically, you know, elevate the motherboard away from the case, ensuring that the backside of the motherboard, which has all of these contacts, that they don't touch anything. Because if they do, a short can occur. It'll end up just killing everything. So getting your standoffs in the right place is very important. Now, most motherboards are indeed labeled. You can just make it out. There's some lettering on some of these. Oh yeah, this is me talking about most motherboards. They'll actually come with a little adapter tool. So if you don't have the correct hex, adapters for your motherboard standoffs, they have this little adapter that's really quite handy that just kind of goes over. You don't want to over tighten them, just enough to get them in nice and snug and make sure they don't come out, because a lot of these metals are actually quite soft, so if you do over tighten them, you'll end up stripping things. But yeah, I think this is me. Yeah, basically I'm just putting in all of the standoffs, making sure they're in the correct place. Let's skip a little bit of this, shall we? We'll fast forward. As you can see, me going down on my particular motherboard, I believe it's got 9. Yes, 3 at the top, 3 in the middle, and 3 at the bottom. Right, let's fast forward again a little bit. Okay, here we go. Rewind. See, sorry, I know I could just edit all this stuff in, but I like doing these things kind of by the seat of my pants, just live and getting them all set up as I go. Come on. There we go. So right, when it comes to installing the motherboard itself, get a good grip on it. As you can see, I'm using the big bulky I/O of this to basically get a hold of it. If you don't have something as bulky as that, then obviously use 2 hands, lay it down. If you're using a traditional case, the chances are you'll have it lying down, so you won't have to support it too much. It was just in my case, because it's vertical like this, and I wanted to try recording it. I had to, try to hold it up in place. But you put in your screws relatively. You don't want them super tight, not initially, because what you want to do is you want to get all the screws in there, so it'll basically sit in place. And then once all your screws are in, then you can go ahead and try to torque them in nicely. But so it's just, again, be careful, take your time. The last thing you want to do is to stab a part of your motherboard with your screwdriver. That's definitely not a good thing, because you can end up scratching something. You got to remember some of these capacitors that are, can my finger reach over there? No, just that frame. But these kind of capacitors that you'll see, they can be quite fragile, especially if you jam them with a screwdriver, or likewise knock them around. So just be careful, take your time. It's what's quite good about PC Building Simulator. You can't damage things like that. And PC Building Simulator, of course, will actually allow you to kind of play around and see, how they install things piece by piece. I'm trying to think, what did I do next? Let me just skim forward just a little bit. Yeah, so just getting all the rest of the screws in, torque them in. Yeah, that's me just double checking. Right, so now it came to the power cables. Well, I say power cables, but all of the cables. You end up having all of these things you need to plug in. You'll have your audio cable for your traditional microphone and a headphone port. Your USB 3 header. It's such a horrible cable. It's big, it's bulky, it's definitely no fun. You may have traditional USB headers as well, and then of course you have the front panel connectors. Front panel connectors, on the motherboard itself, they are labeled. It can be quite hard to see. This is when you really want to use your motherboard manual to have a look. Usually front panel connectors are labeled all quite well, so you can attach them relatively easy. Again, just take your time. You want to make sure the polarity is correct. You'll soon find out if it's not, because things won't work as intended. And so, if that's the case, just don't panic. Just go back and just flip them around. What's quite nice about the Asus boards, and a lot of other motherboards do this as well, is they come with a little adapter block. So then the block is keyed specifically for your motherboard, and what it allows you to do, instead of trying to get all those individual cables on the motherboard, you just put them in the block, and then the block goes on the motherboard. It does add a little bit of extra spacing and extra stuff to your cabling, but if it's easier, then why not? Especially if you're just starting out, if it's your first build. But as you can see, this USB 3 header, I hate them. They're just so ugly, and I've looked all over the place for aftermarket ones, and it's really difficult to find them. But the only thing you can do is maybe try to apply custom sleeving to make them look a bit better, or just hide them the best you can. Fortunately, now in my build with the components, the way they're situated, you can't really see it, so it's not too ugly. But you just need to make sure that you've got enough slack, if need be. If like in a very large case, depending how you've got your cables routed, you may have to get extension cables, and in my build I absolutely got extension cables for all of the power bits, because the ones that came with my power supply were not the most aesthetically pleasing. So I upgraded to cable mod, some much better looking ones. But let me just fast forward a little bit. Oh yeah, see there I was talking about the manual itself, where if you have any kind of doubt on where a cable goes or the correct orientation, I mean, most of them are keyed, but just look at your manual and it'll keep you on the right track. So here I am. Let's see, what am I doing? Yep. Next I was doing the audio cable, the USB cable. Now next, I did the front panels, and now this is the little adapter I was talking about. And so when I put this together initially, I used it just for demonstration, to show that rather than having to, try to get all those in the right place, which depending on your case, could be quite tricky, whether that's due to a lack of space, or even just the inability to see quite well. You can use this little adapter, which, as you can see here, it's kind of out of shot, isn't it? Darn it. Again, this is what happens when you're trying to do too many things at once. Yeah, come on, AJ, raise it up a little bit. Surely I'll remember. Oh, hey, yeah, I need to try to get this a bit higher. I'm pretty sure that I did, or at least I know that once I got them hooked in, I definitely brought it into the frame so you could actually see what it looks like. Or did I? Well, maybe I didn't. Okay, I gave myself the benefit of the doubt, but oh yeah, see, so you can barely. Sorry, it's a bit small, but see, so now it's just this nice one big block. All the cables are in that block, and boom, you just slide that in, and it works quite well. So once you've got all your cables attached in, the next thing is basically to deal with your power cables. So you'll have to get your 24 pin installed. Most of these, if I actually switch back to our virtual PC, you've got your 24 pin here, which is, your main motherboard power, right? Which obviously you need to connect to your power supply. But then you've also got these additional powers up here. Now this is the thing, like on some of your more inexpensive motherboards, you may only have the 4-pin connector, and there's nothing wrong with that. But on the high-end motherboards, you'll have actually 2 here. So like in this case, as you can see, this has a 4-pin and an 8-pin. And the whole purpose of that is for more power delivery that aids stability during overclocking. So again, if it's something that you're interested in, if you want to, really get the maximum performance out of your system, or even if you're just, want a lot of stability, that's what these high-end motherboards can offer you, because they have this additional power delivery. So that was important for me, because I do, maybe not initially, but later down the system, I do want to tweak the system. That's just in my nature. I like to mess with things, like to overclock things. It's like my current video card, I'm using a 1060, which I need something with a bit more oomph, but until I can, I'm overclocking it and getting actually pretty decent performance out of it. Processors, in the past, yes, same, I've overclocked when need be, but for the most part, you only really need to overclock if your system's getting a bit old and you want to upgrade, you need an upgrade, and you need to eke that just that little bit more performance out. I don't usually recommend jumping straight into overclocking right away, but it can be fun. It's a hobby in of itself. But yes, choosing a motherboard is really important. I can't stress enough, I'm not saying go spend crazy money if you can't afford it. No, all I mean is when you're planning your system build, try not to skimp in the motherboard department, just as you wouldn't want to skimp in the power supply department. If anything, it might not be a horrible idea to get, to maybe save money on the processor, just so you can get a better motherboard, because as I said here, with this motherboard, at least with the Ryzen's, because it's the AM4 platform, this is going to support the next generation, potentially even the generation after that. So this motherboard is going to last me quite a while, whereas if I had went with a different platform, I could potentially only be stuck with that generation of CPU. So there's a lot to consider, so much so that it's hard to try to put it all into one video, especially when I just really wanted to more kind of show installation and things to consider. But as always, you can pop by Discord or even our subreddit, and if you have any further questions or you want to chat a bit about, hey, wait a minute, I'm on the fence, I'm looking at these motherboards here, which one's for me, because there is a lot to consider. When it comes to the brands, to each their own. Yes, for me, I have decided to go with Asus, but there's actually a specific reason for that, because it's all to do with my other components. But in the meantime, look, that's going to cover it for this episode of PC Building Fundamentals. Again, just motherboards, it's an important aspect of your system. If you skimp in that area, don't be surprised if your system doesn't perform as well as you think it should, because it can really just let the entire build down if you do. Next time, I don't know what we're going to do. Potentially processors. Yeah, we might do CPUs. Seems like the logical step following motherboards, doesn't it? But in the meantime, look, make sure to check out the website, www.scholarlygamers.com. Check out all our great streamers kicking out there on Twitch. You can usually find us on Twitter quite easily by using the hashtag scholarlygamers. And of course, pop by our Discord sometime, where there's usually some type of chat or about gaming. And if someone does start talking about tech, usually I can't help myself but get involved. But yeah, it's not always about tech. Mostly there's a discussion about gaming and whatnot. But anyway, look, hey, thanks for watching. Hope it's been of some assistance to you if you're looking to build a PC. And in the meantime, stay safe and take it easy. Catch you next time.